I woke up to complete darkness. It was pitch black. And when I say pitch, I mean pitch black. The blackest of blacks. The blackest of blacks. Blacker than sin. But anyway, you get the point. I groggily moaned in the darkness. Hello? Is anyone there? Dead silence, and the smell of blood, vomit, piss, and feces began filling my nostrils, and it was overwhelming. I tried moving my hands, my legs, and my head, only then realizing I was tied down tightly with leather straps in a standing position to what appeared to be a stone wall. I began freaking out, waving and kicking my arms and legs in a feeble attempt to break myself free. I started screaming for help from somebody, anybody, my voice echoing through the darkness until it was gone. But again, dead silence. I was there, strapped to the wall for what felt like an eternity, and was softly crying, tears rolling down my face as I shook in silence. When suddenly, through my tears, I saw two small red lights appear directly in front of me, about 30 feet away, and they were growing larger as they appeared to be coming closer. But as they did, I realized that they weren't lights at all, but were eyes. The moment that clicked in my brain, the darkness began to illuminate, as flames slowly rose up from torches that I can only assume were mounted to the walls. The room was huge, the flames ascending into the darkness. As the room slowly lit up from the flames, out of the darkness appeared a familiar yet haunting figure. It was the old man. He was about 5 feet away from me, with his red eyes slowly fading to black. What I saw standing before me will forever be burned into my subconscious mind. This time he wasn't wearing a white three-piece suit, snakeskin shoes, no hat, and he wasn't holding any goat's head cane. This time he wore nothing. He was completely naked, with no genitalia at all, and looked like an old naked version of a Ken doll in that area. Seriously though, his skin was very thin, almost transparent and very pale. It wrapped tightly around his skeletal frame like a dog that hasn't eaten in months. There were greenish-brown pus-filled bubbles expanding and contracting all over his body, and his long, stringy white hair seemed to have spiders and other insects crawling through it. I felt that feeling begin to stir in my throat, and I couldn't compose myself any longer. I began to projectile vomit directly into his face. It made that Linda Blair vomit scene from The Exorcist look like nothing. However, what he did next almost made me throw up again. With my puke and my stomach acids dripping down his face, he began to smile with those same sharp razor-like teeth appearing as he did. He laughed a sinister laugh, then his mouth began to open as dry chunks of skin again fell from his lips. Suddenly out came his tongue, blood red and forked, waving up and down violently like a rattlesnake. Then he began to swiftly lick the vomit and stomach acids off his face until it was completely gone, by which time his tongue had ascended back into his mouth with one final rattlesnake whip. That same razor-toothed smile quickly appeared on his face once again, as he whispered one word in an evil, maniacal tone.
Tasty.
I was scared out of my mind and screamed at the top of my lungs. I thrashed my body all around and the leather straps dug into my skin, droplets of blood trickling down my arms and feet as the straps tore into my flesh. Over my screams I heard him say,
Ah, music to my ears. Go ahead, scream louder, I love it.
I stopped screaming immediately and dropped my head, heavily panting and trying to catch my breath. Blood was now pouring from my open wounds and quickly drying on my skin when he laughed that maniacal laugh again and said,
You humans are so weak. Such pathetic, vile little creatures, never satisfied with what you have, always wanting more and more, willing to give up your soul. And for what? Fame? Fortune? Sex with a pretty girl? You make me sick. So petty, so self-absorbed, and always of only yourselves. Now that I think about it, you actually make my job easy. You humans are always ripe for the picking, and you were no different.
Who are you? I said, in a shaky, stuttery voice.
Well, my mere mortal, some say I am the devil, but they are wrong. I am a soul seeker, the devil's right-hand man, so to speak. I seek out those who are willing to give up their souls for small, insignificant things, just like you.
I didn't mean it. I don't want to sell my soul, I cried.
Oh, please. It's too late for that. You've already said it. You humans are always saying things you don't mean. I hate you. I love you. And in your case, hell yeah. When will you learn that whether you mean it or not, the spoken word cannot be retracted?
Oh God, please help me, I screamed. His face then became stern and cold as he leaned in inches from my face, his hot, wretched breath burning my nose hairs, and he yelled,
God cannot help you here!
And he slowly stepped back with that same evil grin, once again appearing on his face. For the third time I began to cry uncontrollably. I want to go home. I want to see my mum, I said frantically. Then he raised his arms to the ceiling once again and brought them down swiftly.
Oh, come now. Don't be a pussy, Mr. Rock and Roll. It's time to man up. We made a deal, and I intend to see that deal through.
This time, though, the walls, the ceiling, and the floor all burst outward and began falling into a huge pit of fire, leaving only myself, the old man, and the stone wall behind me on a small, swaying pedestal in the middle of the pit. Flames burst up so violently and viciously, and the heat was unbearable from down below. I could hear violent screams of torture and despair, and it was deafening.
Ah, sing to me, my children,
he said, then looked at me. I screamed directly in his face as he put his left hand on my forehead, pushing it back against the wall with a force so hard that I thought it would break my skull. He then took his right hand and placed it on my jaw, forcing my mouth open. I screamed, but nothing came out. He leaned in then, only centimeters from my face, and did that tongue thing again. Then he began to suck the soul out of me through my mouth. My body began to convulse as the air was pulled from my lungs, and a bright white mist began to exit my mouth and enter into his. The pain was excruciating, and just as I felt myself start to pass out from the pain, my body suddenly jerked back, and the mist was gone. I was able to breathe again. He stepped back, licked his lips, and said,
I love the taste of innocence.
Then he stepped back even further, almost to the edge of the pedestal.
7 years. 7 years is what you have. In that time you will achieve all your desires. I will come to you, and at the end of those 7 years you will begin your eternal damnation here in the pits of hell.
He then placed his right foot on top of his left, spread his arms out just above his shoulders, and hung his head to the right, I assumed to mock the crucifixion of Christ. Then he fell backwards into the pit of fire. Maniacal laughter rang out as he fell, and the flames began growing even higher as I felt the heat begin to burn my skin. I screamed the loudest I've ever screamed in my life, until I lost consciousness. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed my video, and if you did, could you please give me virtual hugs by subscribing and clicking that notifications button. I also have a Patreon page and YouTube channel membership if you'd like to support me further. Thank you again for being here. Keep being creepy.